morning, students. Okay, today I'll move forward with the gastrointestinal tract. And yesterday we basically discussed about the products as well. Okay, and there are some other products which are also involved in the gastrointestinal tract. Okay, so now this is a diagram of a mouth and as per respiratory tract. Okay, where pigmented in the mouth, pigmented and non-pigmented micrococci are basically present. Gram-positive aerobic spore bacilli, coliforms, proteus, and lactobacilli, as well as the anaerobic micrococci, anaerobic streptococci, Vibrios, fusiform bacteria, bacilli, coronium species, even actinomycetes and mycoplasmas. Okay, as well as Neisseria and bacterioids in the gum pockets and the tonsils. Okay, so what is basically, or what are the conditions, okay, which are present in the mouth? Okay, so the microbes, okay, which are basically abundant in the mouth, okay, coat all the surfaces of the oral cavity. However, different structures such as teeth or cheeks and some of the host unique communities of both aerobic and anaerobic microbes and some factors which also appear to work making making the mouth hospitable to various microbes. For example, chewing allows microbes to mix better with the saliva so that they can be swallowed or spit out more easily. Okay, for example, saliva, which contains enzymes including lysozyme, can also damage the microbial cells. And to recall, to recall the last lectures, lysozyme is basically a part of the first line defense in the innate immune systems and leaves beta-1,4 glycosidic linkages with the N-acetyl glucose amine and N-acetylmuramic acid in the bacterial peptidoglycan. Okay, and additionally there are also other fluids which contain immunoglobulins and phagocytic cells which are produced in the gingival spaces. Despite all of these chemical and mechanical activities, microbes are one of the biggest community in the mouth. Okay, so what are the other conditions of the general other microbial floras, and what are the functions of the other general microbial floras? Okay, now please have a look of the gastrointestinal tract and the major members of its microbiota, as well as the taxa representative of microorganisms found in the healthy adults. Okay, now starting with this one. Okay, liver, and basically in the esophagus section where Prevotella, Streptococcus, Veillonella. Okay, and in this section here, okay, which is a stomach section where Heliobacter, Proteobacteria, Bacteroidetes, Actinobacteria, Fusobacteria, and Firmicutes. Okay, and stomach typically has the bacteria only when the pH has been raised, and more probably there are more of a transient flora than the permanent flora of the stomach. Okay, and in this jejunum, which contains enterococci and lactobacilli, and in the case of ileum, okay, in case of an ileum, as well as the large intestine, which contains bacteroids, Bifidobacterium, Clostridium, Enterobacteria, Enterococcus, Escherichia, Eubacterium, Klebsiella, Lactobacillus, Methanobrevibacter, Peptococcus, Peptostreptococcus, Proteus, Ruminococcus, Staphylococcus, and Streptococcus. So what are the major physiological processes here, okay, which occurs in the gastrointestinal tract? Okay, first one is the secretion of acid, okay, which leads to digestion of a macromolecules. And in the small intestine, the continuous digestion and absorption of monosaccharides, amino acids, fatty acids, water, and the pH is about 4 to 5 in the small intestine. Okay, in the large intestine, absorption of bile acids and vitamin B12, and the pH will be around 7. Okay, these are the basic conditions of a gastrointestinal tract. Okay, so the digested food, okay, which basically uh, involves the small intestine as well as large intestine. Okay, now starting with the whole of a process. Okay, when food basically leaves a oral cavity, it travels through the pharynx or the back of the throat and moves through the esophagus, and basically which carries food from the pharynx to the stomach without any addition of the digestive enzymes, Now the stomach produces mucus. Okay, now the stomach produces mucus to protect its lining against the acid which will be produced by the stomach. Okay, and the digestive enzymes and the acid will now be produced in the stomach, and the partially digested food then leaves the stomach through the pyloric sphincter, reaching the first part of the intestine called the duodenum. Okay, where you can see clearly where the duodenum is. And the pancreatic juice, which includes enzymes and bicarbonate ions, is released into the small intestine to neutralize the acidic material from the stomach for assisting the digestion process. And the bile produced by the liver, okay, now the bile which is produced by the liver but stored in the gallbladder will be now released into the small intestine to emulsify the fats so that they can travel in the watery environment of the small intestine. And the digestion continues in the small intestine, where majority of nutrients contained in the foods are absorbed, and the simple columnar epithelial cells called enterocytes line the lumen surface of the intestinal folds called villi. Okay, and each enterocyte has a smaller microvilli on the cellular apical surface that increase the surface area to allow more absorption of nutrients to occur basically. Okay, uh, TY students, please call other students and tell them to join the lecture. Okay, I can see there are just 7 students, okay, who have joined the lecture. Please call other students for the lecture. Now moving forward with the digested food. Okay, I'm waiting for half a minute. TY students, call other students and tell them to join the lecture. There are very low number of students in the class right now. Even one student is itself from the second year, Kinjal Joshi. third year students, please call your students of your class. So why they have still not joined the lecture? Okay, now moving forward with the digestion process. The digested food basically leaves the small intestine and now moves towards the large intestine or a colon, where there is a more diverse amount of microbiota in the large intestine, and near this junction there is a small pouch of large intestine called cecum, okay, which attaches to the which is attached to the appendix, and the further digestion occurs throughout the colon, and the water is reabsorbed and then waste is excreted through the rectum, okay, where you can see the rectum in the diagram, the last section of the colon and out of the body through the anus, okay. And the environment of most gastrointestinal tract is basically harsh, okay, which serves basically two purposes. One is the digestion, the second one is the immunity, okay. So these two main purposes are basically of the digestive system. The stomach, okay, which which have an extremely acidic environment where the pH ranges generally from 1.5 to 3.5, 1.5 to 3.5 pH. Due to the gastric acids, they break down food as well as kill many of the microbes, and this is how a stomach prevents the infection from the pathogens, okay. And the environment in the small intestine is less harsh and is able to support microbial communities. The microorganisms present in the small intestine can include lactobacilli, diphtherioids, and even fungi. One of them, most popular one, is basically Candida. And on the other hand, in the case of a large intestine which contains more number of diverse number of diverse number of bacteria, okay. And these microbes include bacterioids, okay, Perivotella, firmicutes, okay. Even some of them are methanogenic archaea, and some fungi are also present among the other species of bacteria. And these microbes basically aid in the digestion and contribute to the production of the feces and the waste excreted from the digestive tract and flatus. And the gas may be produced from the microbial fermentation of the digested food, and they can also produce valuable nutrients also. For example, lactic acid bacteria such as bifidobacteria can synthesize vitamins such as vitamin B12, folate, riboflavin, okay. So it can produce various other substances also. And the E. coli, which is found in intestine, can also break down food and help the body produce vitamin K, which is important for the blood coagulation, okay. Now here you can clearly see from the small intestine, okay, where the fragments of the food are larger, will further breakdown, okay, will be further breakdown to a smaller fragments in the large intestine, okay. Now these are the products which are produced in the intestine, okay. And the continuous movement of the materials to the gastrointestinal tract also helps us to move transient pathogens out of the body, okay. In fact, feces are composed of approximately 25% microbes and 25% sloughed epithelial cells, 25% of the mucus, and about 25% of undigested or digested food even. Okay, and finally normal microbiota provides an additional barrier to infection via a variety of mechanisms. For example, these microbes basically outcompetes the potential pathogens for space and nutrients within the intestine, and this is known as competitive exclusion. This is known as competitive exclusion. And the members of the microbiota may secrete proteins like toxins, which are also known as bacteriocins, which are basically able to bind to the specific receptors on the surface of the susceptible bacteria. Okay, so as I told you, thermal microbiota are basically involved in the variety of processes. One of them is vitamin synthesis, amino acid synthesis, gas production, odor production, organic acid production, glycosidase reactions, as well as the steroid metabolism, Okay, so vitamins which are produced are thiamine, riboflavin, pyridoxine, B12, K. Amino acids which are produced are asparagine, glutamate, methionine, tryptophan, lysine, and various other amino acids. Gas production, carbon dioxide, methane, and hydrogen. Odor production, H2S, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, amines, indoles, catol, as well as the butyric acids, organic acids, acetic acid, propionic acids, and even butyric acids. Okay, glycosidase reactions which are involved are beta glucuronidase, beta galactosidase, beta glucosidase, alpha glucosidase, and alpha galactosidase. And sterile metabolism in which bacteria involved are esterified or dehydroxylated or oxidized or reduced steroids. Okay, in the gastrointestinal tract, GI of the fetus is basically sterile and it becomes contaminated with the organism shortly after the birth. Okay, in the case of a breastfed children, generally lactobacillus bifidus, enterococci, colon bacilli, and staphylococcus are involved. And in the bottle fed children, okay, which are fed using a bottle, okay, generally lactobacillus acidophilus, enterococci, and colon bacilli are found. Okay, now overview of the gastrointestinal tract, which includes stomach. pH is very low and is generally sterile. And in the small intestine, lactobacilli, streptococci, enterobacteria, even the bacteroids are present. In the case of a large intestine, anaerobic streptococci, anaerobic lactobacilli, Clostridium species, bacterioid species, coliforms, enterococci, proteus, pseudomonas, and candida. Now moving forward with the genitourinary tract, okay, where the microbial flora of genitalia of man, okay, which includes lactobacilli, Gardnerella vaginalis, alpha hemolytic streptococci, bacterial species, Chlamydia trachomatis, which is basically an opportunistic pathogen also, okay, and urea plasma ureaticum. I think there is a mistake here. There will be no Gardnerella vaginalis. Okay, in the case of a microbial flora of the vagina, okay, where lactobacilli, bifidobacterium, peptostreptococcus, propionibacterium, staphylococcus, streptococcus, corynebacterium, Neisseria, Haemophilus, Enterobacteriaceae, non-pathogenic Treponema, and Candida species, of which Treponema sometimes may be opportunistic pathogen. Candida are purely opportunistic pathogens, and the main bacteria which will be involved in the case of microbial flora of vagina will be lactobacilli. Okay, so, what are the other functionalities of the urinogenital systems? Okay, uh, there are over more than over more than 100 million, okay, more than 100 million cases of the urinary tract infections which are caused by bacteria in the world. Okay, you can have an estimate about it. More than 100 million, okay, in which sexually transmitted infections are also primarily affect the urinogenital systems and are the important cause of the patient's death also. Okay, and as you know, the males and females have different urinogenital anatomy. Urinogenital infections may affect males and females differently also. Okay, because they have different systems. Okay, both systems are not the same. Okay, now the normal microbiota, okay, of the urinogenital system. Okay, and what are the basically other different mechanisms which are involved? So the normal microbiota of the different body sites provides an important non-specific defense against infectious diseases, and the urinogenital tract is no such exception. In the case of both man and woman, however, the kidneys are sterile. Okay, please note, the kidneys are sterile, and also urine does contain some antibacterial components. Bacteria will grow in urine left out at room temperature. Therefore, it is primarily the flushing action that keeps ureter and the bladder free of microbes. Free of microbes. Okay. Now, as we move below the bladder, okay, where the normal microbiota of the male urinogenital system is found primarily with the distal urethra, which includes bacterial species which are basically commonly associated with the skin microbiota. But in the case of women, the normal microbiota is found with the distal one-third of the urethra and the vagina. And the normal microbiota of vagina becomes shortly established after birth, and they have a complex and dynamic population of bacteria that fluctuates in response to the environmental changes also. And the members uh, of the vaginal microbiota also play an important role in non-specific defense against vaginal infections as well as sexually transmitted infections by occupying the cellular binding sites and competing for the nutrients. In addition to this, the production of lactic acid by the members of the microbiota provides an acidic environment which also serves as a defense against a variety of infections, but not against the candida. Okay, not against the candida which can grow at a lower pH. Okay, and the woman who basically lack a sufficient lactobacilli in the vagina, the lactic acid production primarily comes from the species of bacteria such as Leptotrichia, Megaspira, Atopium vaginae. Okay, and basically lactobacilli species use glycogen from the vaginal epithelial cells for the metabolism and the production of the lactic acid, and this process is tightly regulated by hormone estrogen. Okay, so in the case of more particularly, the levels of the estrogen also are correlated with the levels of vaginal glycogen. Okay, for example, increased level of estrogen are correlated with the increase in the level of vaginal glycogen as well as the increased production of the lactic acid and a lower vaginal pH. Okay, therefore decrease in estrogen during the menstrual cycle and with the menopause in females are basically associated with the decreased level of vaginal glycogen and lactic acid and can have a higher pH. Okay, and in addition to the lactobacillus species uh, also contribute to the defense against infectious disease through their production of the hydrogen peroxides and bacteriocins such as antibacterial peptides also. Okay, such as antibacterial peptides also. Okay, now moving forward, almost we have completed all of the systems of the human microbial systems. Now moving towards the generalized or system. Okay, I have made a table, included a table in the slide, which will be helpful to study the normal microbial biota, which you can also use during your exam. Okay, and it will be very easy for you to study through this table. So I'm just going to read out the contents of the table one by one. In the case of a region skin, the principal components, the components here are the normal microbial flora, okay, which includes Propionibacterium, Staphylococcus, Corynebacterium, Micrococcus, Acinetobacter, Brevibacterium, Candida, and Malaysia. Okay, and the comments, general comments regarding the skin. Okay, it will be uh, helpful for you to understand. Okay, where the most of microbes in the direct contact with skin don't become residents because the secretion from the sweat and oil glands which have a antimicrobial properties in which keratin is a resistant barrier and the low pH of the skin inhibits many microbes and the skin also has a relatively low moisture content. And the next one is conjunctiva. Okay, Staphylococcus epidermidis, Staphylococcus aureus, diphtherios, Propionibacterium, Corynebacterium, Streptococci, and Micrococci. Okay, comments, the conjunctiva, a continuation of the skin or the mucous membrane, basically contains the same microbiota on the skin, where tears and blinking also eliminate some other colonizing bacteria. Now in the case of nose and throat, upper respiratory system, where Staphylococcus aureus, Staphylococcus epidermidis, and aerobic diphtherioids in the nose. Okay, where Staphylococcus epidermidis, okay, Streptococcus pneumoniae, Haemophilus, and Neisseria in the throat. And also some microbiota are potential pathogens. Their ability to cause disease is reduced by the microbial antagonism. Okay, you all know what do you mean by antagonism. Okay, we have studied in your semester 4. The nasal secretions kill or inhibit many microbes and mucous membrane and have a ciliary action which removes many microbes. And in the mouth, the examples are Streptococcus, Lactobacillus, Actinomyces, Bacterioides, Veillonella, Neisseria, Haemophilus, Fusobacterium, Treponema, Staphylococcus, Corynebacterium, and Candida. Okay, as you all know, mouth have an abundant amount of moisture, warmth, and the constant presence of the food make the mouth an ideal environment that supports very large and diverse microbial populations on the tongue, cheeks, teeth and gums. Biting and chewing, the tongue movements and the salivary flow basically helps to dislodge microbes. And the saliva also contains several antimicrobial substances which we have discussed in the lecture. Okay, in the case of a large intestine where E. coli, bacteroids, Fusobacterium, Lactobacilli, Enterococcus, Bifidobacterium, Enterobacter, Cetrobacter, Proteus, Klebsiella and Candida. Okay, and the large intestine basically contains large number of resident microbiota in the body because of its availability of moisture as well as the nutrients from the food. Mucus and the periodic shedding. Okay, mucus, the periodic shedding of the lining prevents the many microbes from attaching sorry from attaching to the lining of the gastrointestinal tract, and the mucosa produces several antimicrobial chemicals also. And diarrhea also flushes out some of the normal microbiota along with some of the pathogens, okay, which are also flushed out of the body. Now the urinary and the reproductive systems, okay, where the common examples are Staphylococcus, Micrococcus, Enterococcus, Lactobacillus, Bacteroides, Arabic diphtheria, Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, Proteus in urethra, Lactobacilli, Streptococcus, Clostridium, Candida albicans, and Trichomonas vaginalis in the case of vagina. And the lower urethra in the both the sexes, male and female, has a resident population, and the vagina has its acid tolerant population of microbes because of the nature of its secretions. Okay, but it may vary according to the conditions of their menstruation cycle also. Okay, according to the conditions of the menstruation cycle and the periods. The mucus and the periodic shedding of the lining prevents some microbes from attaching to the lining, and your urine flow mechanically basically removes the microbes, and the pH of the urine and urea are basically antimicrobial, and the cilia and mucus expel microbes from the cervix of uterus into the vagina, and the acidity of the vagina also inhibits or kills the microbes. But one such exception which can go easily, it's an opportunistic pathogen candida. Okay, and which are the other factors which basically influence the normal microbial biota? Okay, normal microbial biota, which are the other characters which basically influence normal microbial biota? First character is basically the composition of normal flora of the intestine can be influenced by the various factors such as strong emotional stress. Okay, if you have any stress, various emotions. Okay, food, it's one of the most important factor, and changes in air pressure due to the altitude as well as the starvation. And it should be noted that in the case of diarrhea, as a result of the rapid movements of the intestinal contents, and the intestinal flora basically undergoes a considerable change. Okay, basically undergoes a considerable change, and the alteration of flora and also occurs in persons receiving antimicrobial treatments from the by using antibiotics. Sometimes sometimes organic susceptible to the antibiotic being administered may be replaced by the antibiotic resistant strains also. Okay, so it may be possible. And very other factors are diet, bile acids which are secreted in the duodenum from the gallbladder, the presence of antibodies secreted in the intestine. However, these factors, how they work, are still not clear, but the evidence suggests that their influence may be negligible. Okay. Now, which are the sterile sites of the human body? Okay. Which are the sterile sites of the human body where even a single microbe is not found? If there is any microbe, even a single, okay, has been detected, it indicates a disease condition, okay, or a infection. It indicates an infection. Body fluids which includes are basically sterile includes blood, cerebrospinal fluid, synovial, pleural, pericardial, peritoneal, and other exudates which are normally sterile or transiently infected by the microbes. Okay, so we can detect the microbes only in the case of infection, only in the case of infection. So that is the reason word transient is used here. Okay, and some microbes from the mouth and the gastrointestinal tract can invade even blood streams in the healthy individuals. For example, during your during when you are brushing teeth, and when the over bowel movement during the infections also. Okay, and these organisms are rapidly moved and are of little significance, and thus the isolation of an organism from the body fluids should be considered significant unless the specimen is contaminated during the collection. Because why it should be considered significant? Okay, because it indicates the higher chances of the infection in your body. Okay, in your body. Okay, so I am ending my lecture. Please comment present sir for the attendance. Please comment present sir for the attendance, and join the session of our and join the session of the WebEx of 8:40. Join the session of WebEx of 8:40.